Ladies and gentlemen, we are live here on a Tuesday night. In fact, it's March 15th, 2022, and this is Crime and Culture Live. We got a full room here tonight. I'm Tim here with Lance as always. What's up, Lance?
What's going on? Yeah, usually we come into these nights like charged up. We know we're going to have a good time. We will have a good time tonight, but tonight is layered with a little bit of a somber tone. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the disappearance of Brianna Maitland because we are coming up on the 18th commemorative date of her disappearance. And we've decided to bring aboard, the usual cast of characters. That's meant in a good way when we always talk about the disappearance of Brianna, where we have Greg Overacker, Lou Barry, we got Jenna Mel, we have Chloe and Melina from True Crime Twins. So it's going to be sort of a round table. Hey, we might end up laughing, cracking a couple of jokes. We got to keep it a little bit light because that's how you can process stuff like this, right? So anyway, welcome everybody. The Zoom screen is just full, and Lou, you're looking super handsome with that white polo and the graphics and the lighting.
Thanks.
Well, welcome to the show. Greg Overacker and Lou Barry, you guys are both private investigators. I just want to mention private investigations for the missing right off the top here. And you can check out more information at investigationsforthemissing.org. And that is the nonprofit that Bruce Maitland founded. Of course, Bruce is Brianna Maitland's father. Brianna Maitland went missing from Montgomery, Vermont on March 19th, 2004. Greg and Lou, what is it like working on this case? And at this point, it's been years for both of you.
I guess frustrating is probably the key word. Greg, would you agree?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, absolutely frustrating. One of the problems Lou and I were talking about the show tonight is certain things that we can't tell the public. And I know the public gets frustrated with that. It's frustrating for us too. But Lou suggested we kind of try to talk about some of the rumors and maybe put them to bed. I thought that was a pretty good idea.
And we got a pretty decent sized chat room filling up right now with Shannon and Ginger, all the usual suspects, right? Aaron, I think Jason Watch just popped in there, Jillian. But as that chat room is filling up, you just mentioned the rumors. I also want to, I don't know, did we even introduce Jenna Mel down there? I'm so sorry, Jen. We just got all, Jennifer
Mel. You mentioned her in the beginning.
Oh, did I? Okay, I just got distracted by Lou's great lighting. But yeah, Greg, you just mentioned put to bed some of the rumors without getting into specific rumors. Do you feel like that's something that you have to do? And even you, Lou, is this something that you have to do every year when it comes up, that there's just a new bunch of rumors or maybe old rumors that are resurfacing?
Yeah. Over and over and over.
So Lou and I find each other calling each other. I'll call Lou for something just to say something quick or hello or something. We end up on the phone for a half an hour or 40 minutes, and we're not arguing, but going back and forth and knocking stuff down. And just to give you an example, for people who are familiar with the case, Ellen Ducharme. I mean, Lou and I will talk about this for an hour at a time. Or there's a ton of them, or the search of the manure pit, or any of those things. And it's funny that when Lou came into this and we sat down, and I was, we've talked about this before on your show, where I kind of pushed up, the Encyclopedia Britannica at him and said, have fun. And now he's like a wealth of information, and I call him and he answers my questions because I can't remember all this stuff. And it works both ways, but it's just, it's so much information. Yeah.
I think that one of the frustrating things is that this case has been investigated over and over and over, and certain aspects of it have been looked at and kind of put aside. And these rumors that have been floating for 18 years just keep resurfacing. with new people. And it's like, oh, I heard this and this was, and then you just like shake your head and say, no, that's been checked out and that, there's no credence to that. And, that can get very time consuming because you hear a variation of a story that's been disproven, but someone will morph it a little bit and make it so that you have to kind of look at that angle, and that just is so time consuming and frustrating.
Yeah.
It just makes it difficult. And then to compound that, you have people that insert themselves and claim knowledge that have no knowledge. I mean, case in point, there was a post on a social media site by a young lady a week or so ago saying that she and this other girl, and she named the girl, were supposed to meet with Brianna that night or the next day, and she never showed up. And so immediately we started checking that and checked with Brianna's friends and said this girl wasn't a friend of hers. And I talked to the girl that she named yesterday, and she said, no, I didn't even know Brianna to speak of. And I don't know who that girl is or why she's saying that. So that can get frustrating also.
And you never
As,
know what to do initially. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Greg.
No, when stuff like that comes in, Lou will call me and say, oh, this is what we're looking at, blah, 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 blah. Initially, of course, you wholeheartedly want to dive into it and look at it, but immediately red flags start going up. Like she was supposed to meet somebody that night. She's leaving work at 11:20 at night and she's got to be to work at literally 5:30 a.m. That's like the discussions of her going out to a party and all that other stuff. She's telling people she's rushing home to get in bed, to get up at work, to be at work at 5:30 a.m. or something. And she's going to go to a party and, do drugs all night or something, it just doesn't make sense.
And Shannon had a comment here. Why the heck do people start rumors like that? So damaging. And I kind of want to present this to the True Crime Twins. Like, do you guys have an idea? Yeah, like there's so many answers to that, right? Like, why do people inject themselves into cases and start rumors? Like psychologically speaking, what is that called? Like, why is that even a thing?
I don't think it can be like localized to one specific issue. I think everybody that does that comes from their own places and has their own motivations. But I think at the root of most of it is attention seeking behavior, unfortunately. And it's sad that that's what they resort to, because obviously inserting yourself and putting out erroneous information about something that's so delicate. This is a real person and her family suffer every single day. So to get your kicks out of that, to try to get any form of attention from that, it's kind of morally bankrupt when you really think about it. So either these people are lacking something as far as their moral compass goes, or they're not all there and they don't really know the difference between right and wrong, unfortunately.
It's a great answer. And Kira said boredom, narcissism, lack of education. And I actually have never considered boredom being that dangerous of a is it an emotion or a state of being? I never considered boredom being so dangerous, because there's many ways you can find a way to bring attention to yourself that aren't as destructive or morally bankrupt. I just hearing your explanation and seeing boredom being like one of the causes is just mind blowing to me. Because when you get bored, what do you do? Like read a book or something? Like, what do you guys do when you get bored? You certainly don't inject yourselves into missing person cases.
Well,
along
honestly,
those lines, I think COVID, since we had this COVID thing came out, it's increased because the boredom's increased. COVID's had an impact on this case because, people that we would have liked to have questioned, we can't due to travel restrictions and whatnot. So, but part of that is just what they're saying, the boredom aspect of it. People have nothing to do, so they go online, and
that goes into a huge, deeper question too, Chloe, where what is it that some people can treat this as entertainment, and they don't realize that this is someone's child, and that, it's kind of like when you see a show where women show up at Ted Bundy's trial and cheer for him and adore him and everything. What is that disconnect where they don't realize that he murdered women and had sex with their dead bodies? There's some kind of mental issue there that I don't understand. And that's got to be a big part of this whole, like, where people interjecting and not, whatever that is.
And I mean, when you take a step back, clearly every single one of us on this panel here tonight, we're all interested in missing persons cases and in missing people, but we're all trying to take that interest and do something productive and try to be helpful. It's completely different in a much darker direction when you have to kind of look at yourself and it's like, is this a helpful thing that I'm doing, or is it just completely self-serving? And if it's just something that feeds your sense of wanting attention or your ego or your narcissism, then you're absolutely not in this for the right reasons. And I also have seen and feel that some people almost are lying to themselves, like they're kidding themselves into thinking that they're doing something helpful, and they're just not. It can be, I think, delusional.
It's strange to go to work with Lou and then walk away from an interview and ask his opinion when someone does this. With him being 35-year veteran, and the years, Lou, that you dealt with that, with talking to people and interviewing people, I mean, is it relative to what we see in Brianna's case, or is it a different extreme?
Well, there's a couple things that I think you learn over the years. One, people that are guilty of something never tell you the entire truth. I mean, they may admit to some serious crime and leave out and lie about little details. It's kind of ironic, but I don't know why they do it, but they do. I don't know, just, you could have stopped it. It's strange to work with Lou, and that would have been.
Yeah.
I just a little bit off topic, but I something before I forget. One thing that really drives me or upsets me, I guess, a little bit, is that people go on to social media and they throw out names of people that have, that may have been at one point considered persons of interest, but there's dozens of them, and they're not obviously all involved, and their reputations, their names are being dragged through the mud over and over and over again with no evidence, and that's not fair. I mean, they're also in a sense victims, because if they had nothing to do with it, then their name doesn't belong plastered all over social media.
I have to comment on that. So when there's differences in those people, and I know, I agree with you absolutely, but when people discuss people like Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, the two guys that were the drug dealers who we know committed crimes up there. I mean, they were arrested. Jackson, who was up there dealing crack cocaine for a living, and then went down south and ended up doing 9 years in prison for trafficking. He was caught with 528 grams of coke and went to prison and all this other stuff. I don't mind talking about them. The criminals, they were up there doing criminal behavior. They were intermingled somewhat with Brianna's life and that, but I don't think that's what you're referring to. You're referring to, and it's something that Lou and I have talked about many times, these websites where people go on and they say, hey, this friend, that friend, and that friend, start talking about. Don't do that. Those are average people. Even Jackson and Ryans, there's absolutely zero evidence that they had anything to do with Brianna's disappearance. It's even not fair to them, but they were involved in a lot of criminal activity, and they can't say we're lying. They were arrested, they were prosecuted, all that other good stuff. So that I don't.
And there are some people that inserted themselves into the case by making stupid statements about knowing something or doing something when they had,
right.
And that's kind of a different situation.
So the manure pit that they got, I don't even know if we should say his name, the manure pit that got searched, and the people that live up there and the people that are involved in this case and the people that are on the chat sites and all that other stuff know who we're talking about. But when you follow that back, there's no evidence that any of that was ever real. that was there's nothing to prove that actually searching that manure pit had anything to do with Brianna's disappearance. Someone came forward and said, I heard this, and that's where that derived from. And that's, I think, something that's good to tell the public, because I mean, there's other ways that he came up, right, Lou? I mean, we could talk about that too. There's other ways that he came up in topic of Brianna's disappearance. But that particular instance where the state police went there and were granted permission to search, they didn't have a warrant, they were granted permission to search that manure pit. There was no evidence to lead them there or anything. It was a rumor, right? I just want to make sure I say that correctly. Yeah. Put that to rest, kind of thing. And that was a huge rumor that to persist to this day. It's lore now, Yeah. So that's following his family around.
Right. And that kind of happens once a sort of a rumor is repeated enough times in these cases, it kind of just becomes basically a fact to some people, I think, long enough. Jennifer Mel, welcome to the show. You work with us on the Missing podcast, and you've really been thrown into this world of Brianna Maitling. Tell us a little bit about what it's like for you working with these PIs, with Chloe and Melina, and with us and with Bruce.
Nothing but a joy and a pleasure, as always. No, I think so I was brought on board with Private Investigations for the Missing to do some, odd research on other missing persons cases. And of course, I knew that Bruce had lost his daughter, and that was the reason behind the whole organization, or the impetus, I should say. And I really didn't want to touch the case because I didn't feel like I had anything to add. I knew I wasn't going to solve it myself. But I think over the years, and getting to know Bruce personally, like Brianna has just come alive for me. And I've been up there a few times now. I mean, I live in Burlington, Vermont, so it's kind of a hop, skip, and a jump over to Montgomery. But it's been hard because I know, like on our show Missing, I'll have a couple conversations with family members of missing people, get interviews with them and stuff. And of course, you care. But Brianna just seems different because we've all kind of come together because of her. And it's beautiful and touching in a different way than other cases have. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
yeah,
that's how it feels.
For sure.
Yeah,
we've all become friends with each other and with Bruce. I never could have imagined all the people that I've met over the years and become friends with and becoming close with Bruce and everything.
I think this might
Jen
actually
around
be
northern Vermont for a day, and I think she saw things that she never knew existed before.
Yeah, it's a little rough up there in some places.
I'm sorry, Lance, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Don't ever interrupt me. I will make sure that all of your credentials are discredited. I don't know what I'm talking about. I was going to say everyone's answer there after Jen spoke kind of is an answer to what Shannon was saying, and I'm scrolling here. I don't want to lose this. She basically was asking, how do you keep going? Like you're talking about, what keeps Lou and Greg going? How do they maintain their determination to keep investigating? Do they ever feel like giving up? And what you were just saying, there's this whole community. You're making friends. You're going into upstate Vermont with Jen and just digging in there. But what is it? Is it that plus something else?
I don't know. Now I'm friends with Bruce, so it's offensive to me now. I mean, it pisses me off. Every day I do something to do with this. I read, I write, I'm calling Lou, I'm doing something every day. And I don't know if it's an obsession or what it is, but it's been like that for years. And I don't know what it is, but it's there all the time.
I think when I came on, I told Bruce a couple things, one of which I didn't want any compensation. And secondly, I wasn't going to give up.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to give up. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I have to walk away from it for a week or two and go back, but it always comes back.
I walked away for a couple of years way back. Well, I mean, I always stayed in touch with Bruce, but I walked away for quite a while. I had to. It was.
I think Greg
aggravating.
and I keep each other going too.
Yeah, for sure.
And what about you, Chloe and Melina?
Oh, you're silent.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I think it holds on to your heart a little bit, and the community that has formed around Brianna and her story, and just the time that has passed. I mean, especially for Greg has been on this case, since 2 years after she disappeared.
No.
All of those factors together, you feel very connected. And like Lou said, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to stop caring and stop, trying to do what we can to contribute in a productive way.
It becomes a bizarre part of your life. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. I live a dual life. I have this life here at home, but for years I would just get in my car and drive up to Vermont. I had a friend who lived in Lake George too for a while. I would stay at his house, pick him up, and we'd go up and just stay up there for a few days or whatever. I'd go to my brother's in Albany and then drive up. And I had this whole other thing, and people here, my friends and my family, very, very little about it. And even now, I mean, like Jen and I went up, and it's a beautiful area and everything. This is another weird part of this too. It's a beautiful area and everything, but when you're up there, you almost feel like you're on enemy territory. It was really bad with Erica Franlich's case, where you feel like there's something bad here in its enemy territory, especially with Franlich's. I don't know so much about Brianna's, but it's definitely an odd thing.
We dragged Chloe up there too, and she saw some places that I think, or heard some things that she had never heard before also.
Let's be real. I made you feel comfortable in those situations, Lou. I was the seasoned one.
We came out of an interview and we went and met in the parking lot, remember? And I walked up to Chloe's window and I go, "What'd you think of that?" Kind of thing. Because I was waiting to see the look on her face. When you hear really bizarre, disenfranchised people talk, you're like, I had this conversation actually today with somebody, and I was explaining to him that when you hear somebody's story, this goes to the rumor thing too, and people are telling you a story and you're trying to follow them, and they're telling you stuff in between the story that has nothing to do with the story. And this girl was telling me, yeah, so we were going to go to this drug house and we were going to stop, pick up. We picked up her, and then we were going to Bobby Joe's house. We got to Bobby Joe's house and she had a baby in the bathtub. So she wasn't going to go. And then and I'm looking at her and she just keeps telling the story, and she gets onto the story and I go, "Can we go back to the baby in the bathtub thing?" And weird, strange, bizarre stuff like that happens in the interview that we did with Chloe. I was just dying to get outside to see what your expression was going to be. Yeah.
We actually had a quote tip 2 weeks ago from an individual who knew exactly what happened. He'd been told it by the devil.
Yeah. That's always entertaining.
I asked Greg
Sorry?
to follow up on that one. He's more
sorry,
into the psychic aspect of things than I am.
Well, Greg's a big believer in the paranormal, so that's
Absolutely.
right up his alley.
Yeah, hold on. You delivered that a
Yeah.
little too fast. Can you back that
Yeah,
up a
can we-
little bit and a little bit clearer? What happened?
Baby in the bathtub.
There was a tip received from an individual who claimed knowledge of what had happened because he'd been told it by the devil.
I mean, don't you think that they're just going too far with that? Like, couldn't it be like your dog or something? Like the devil at that point, you're just like,
Well,
you're showing off.
I think there may be some issues there.
Maybe.
You know,
You ever notice the devil doesn't show up to just shoot the breeze?
No, always gives you cryptic messages.
Walks in the door and you're like, does it have to be bad news every time? You can't just say hello.
As far as you know,
I like
you
how
know,
Lou-
Greg.
I like how Lou always pushes off the psychics and the devil people on me. I'm like, oh, thanks, man. I'll
You
take
should
this.
see it coming, Greg.
I know.
Speaking of like paranormal or like what is it called? Synchronicity. Greg, did you tell that story in public about running into that guy in the restaurant?
Oh, I don't know. Should I?
Yeah.
Without names, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
So-
if you can.
So Jen and I went up to interview a guy specifically in the Montgomery area. So I was talking to one of Brianna's friends, and she said, hey, there's this documentary about the drug use, the drug problem in St. Albans area. And it's called Hungry Heart, by the way, if you want to watch it. And the person you're going to interview is in here, is profiled in it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I can get a look at him and this and that and other thing. And it ended up being a very good documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's about a doctor, a pediatrician in the area. And kids were coming to him that he had dealt with since they were, infants. And they had a drug problem. And he went to the town and he said, look, you better get a handle on this. People are going to start dying. This is going to be an issue, And so the story is about him and how he was an advocate and he helped these kids and everything into their adulthood. And that in the story of the drug problem up there and how awful it is and everything. And so Jen and I went up on a Friday night and we had to go talk to somebody else. We were in St. Albans doing interviews and it got late and I said, hey, let's go to dinner. And as we're walking from restaurant to restaurant, because they were all packed, couldn't get a table, I said, I wish I had gotten a hold of that doctor. I should have looked him up because he could put us in touch. Because if tomorrow I put the whole day aside to find this particular interview, I said, if we can't find him, we're screwed. It takes us all day. It's going to suck. So one of the restaurants and out, we're full, whatever. We walked outside. I said, that looks like a nice place. Let's go over there. We went over a really nice restaurant. They found us a table. We ordered and stuff. I told Jen I got to use the men's room. I went in and I was in the men's room and, it's a house. It's a converted, nice old building. It wasn't a house, but a nice old St. Albans. It looks like something that's been there since 1700, And I opened the door and the doctor's standing right in front of me, waiting to use the bathroom. And I said, you're a doctor. He's like 80. I'm like, you're a doctor, aren't you? He said, yeah. I said, you were in a documentary. Yep. I said, I came here specifically to talk to a friend of yours from New York. He said, okay. He took me to his table and I sat with him and his wife and he talked to me about it. But it was just a bizarre thing. I go back to the table and of course, Jen's waiting for our dinner to show up. And I walk up and I go, while you're over here hanging out, having a beer, I'm over there working in the other room.
Meanwhile, I think he's in the restroom for like an hour. I was like, geez, this guy leaves me here.
And then I called Lou and I said, is this divine intervention, Lou, that this guy would show up? I mean, it didn't help all that much, but it was really strange. And he said, it's St. Albans. There's not all that many people. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Still, though, that's a pretty crazy coincidence.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think my favorite part of the story is that Jen's sitting there for like an hour thinking that you just have like gas.
Yeah.
I'm amazed she waited for him.
Like,
Yeah, I know.
right?
I should have left. Well, he's my ride, though. So
Yeah.
yeah, but after an hour, Greg comes skipping back into the room like a little schoolboy. I was
Yeah.
like, guess what I found?
While you're over here hanging out. Yeah.
It's a good thing they hadn't eaten already. She would have thought he skipped out on the bill and stuck her with it.
Right. Grab his car keys.
And that's funny too, because we're sitting in this restaurant and it's a really nice place and there's people enjoying themselves and everybody looks real nice. It's like a Friday night and, people are having drinks and I'm thinking, I don't see this part of this area. I don't see this. I see the bad. Every time I go up there, I see that underbelly and it seems strange. I know these people exist, but I don't see them and I don't deal with them. I deal with the other part. And yeah.
And Michelle actually brought up an interesting question here. was it actually the case that you met this guy, or was it an elaborate story to cover up the lengthy bathroom trip? Which
Oh yeah, that's what
did
it was.
not consider that until Michelle just said that.
I had to make up something.
That's true.
So besides that rumor, what are some of the most prevalent rumors in Brianna's case that you would like to, I guess, dispel or set the record straight?
I think one of the big ones is the fact that she went to a party and overdosed. And that they dumped her car back there. And, you know, if we've gone over there and over the timeline, and unless that party was real close to the Dutch burn house, it's just almost physically impossible for it to have happened in the time frame involved. She left work at 11:20 and her car was seen at 12:15. There's not a lot of time there to go. You know, we're not talking a city. We're talking you have to drive to get anywhere. I think that's one of the big ones.
That stuff will bend your mind too. It will absolutely. Years ago, we had a written tip. This girl said, I dated a boy and he told me what happened and that they ditched her car there. They were messed up on drugs. And that's why they hit the building and blah, 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 blah. And where they put her and all this other stuff. And I went and just cold knocked on this girl's door when I was up there one time. And the father came to the door and I told him why I was there and then I wanted to talk to her. And he said, yeah, brought her out. She was probably, geez, I don't even know, mid-20s or something. But I explained to her why I was there and everything. And she just started bawling. I mean, just crying, tears running down her face. She was a wreck. And I literally sat her down and I said, honey, you know, you have to get this upset, calm down. But she wasn't upset because I was there. She was upset because she believed this. And she said, he told me this. He told me they ditched her car there and that this is what happened and everything. But it bends your mind because you know that it's physically, like Lou said, it can't happen. It's almost, it seems impossible that would happen. She would have to leave work at 11:20. The car spotted at 12:30. She has to go somewhere in that little time frame. You know, she can only go so far. So she's got to leave and get back to that area. So, you know, that's where it is. She can only drive a certain amount of minutes away and it's got to be a round trip to come back. So she's got to, whatever happened had to happen in that little area. She had to go there, walk in a door, ingest something, fall on the ground. Everybody goes, oh no. They take her back to the Dutch burn, or the car at least, back to the Dutch burn house and ditch it by 12:30. It's just such a fast series of events.
And in your experience in law enforcement and private investigating, we hear about like that motive a lot. You know, this individual went to a party and they overdosed, and then there's a rally of people who come together to dispose of the body so successfully that it's never found again, and there's no trace ever of this body. And then they set up a car, you know, like we just hear like, oh, they probably overdosed and then the friends panicked and got rid of the body. Has that ever happened to you in your experience? Have you ever had that, like where someone overdoses at a party and people do actually get caught for like trying to cover up the murder or the accidental death?
I've never even heard of it. Yeah.
You know, you hear about like the whole dropping people at the hospital thing where they'll drop the body out there, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm sure it happens. I'm surprised it's never happened on your watch, Lou. Something like that. But definitely would be bizarre. I mean, you think that there would be, if this happened and there was a party, you think one person would say, no one's responsible for this. She took, you know, that's just going to lead down a bad road. You know, let's just get her to a hospital or call the police or something. You'd think that would be of course, people aren't in the right mind. And again, the more people are involved, the more people are there, the less likely it is to actually be true or successful.
Right. But you just like answered the mystery right there when you said people aren't in their right mind. If they're not in their right mind, they're not successfully hiding a body for 18 years and keeping that a secret.
Keep it in a secret. That's, you know, if more than one person knows what happened, the secret's not going to stay forever.
The only exception to that, the only reason I ever give that any type of a thought as far as there being an exception is that I personally never experienced an area like that. To me, it's hard to explain to people who've never been there. And I'm not trying to insult the people that live there. It's odd. It's an odd existence. Super sparsely populated. Everybody's related. It's just, Lou and I have this thing where when we've gone up there, when we went up there and we did these interviews and stuff, when we left, we'd sit in the car and I'd look at him and go, is this normal? Because this isn't my normal to me, that not just one person lies to you or two people lie to you or something. People have nothing to do with their lying to you. Why are they all doing this? What is this bizarre vortex that we're in where everyone makes up a story? And I don't get it. And that's the only thing that I think is an exception to the rule kind of thing.
I think part of it is they're making things up. And part of it is, number one, it's been 18 years now. And number two, many of them have had drug issues or alcohol issues or both. And their memory is not what you might think it would be. And we run into that a lot where people just don't remember things, or they tell us one thing that they've told other people other things, and it happens over and over and over again.
They will be emphatic about stuff though, and you're like, normally you go to someone's house and say, "Do you know anything about this?" And they're like, "Nah, I'm sorry, I don't." That doesn't happen. They tell you a story. Oh yeah, and it almost seemed as though in a lot of cases people didn't know the difference between fact and fiction, or they didn't know the difference between a rumor and a fact, and which was really hard to deal with. And Jen and I had this discussion when we were up there. I mean, it's a bizarro thing. So, yeah, again, and I'm not trying to, I don't want to sound like I'm saying bad things about the people who live up there and have lived up there for generations and that's their home and stuff. But Brianna's friends that we've talked to that were, that made it through the storm of drug addiction and all that other stuff, and they're good people and we care about them and everything. And these girls will tell you they don't know any girl that they've known going to school with or growing up that wasn't sexually assaulted. That's a bizarre thing. They'll also say the girls would actually date girls not because that was their sexual preference, but because it was the safer choice because of domestic violence. That says a lot to me. I would think, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of facial expressions coming from Melina down there, so I'm just wondering what's going through your mind right now.
So it's funny because I've heard people say that before. I don't know. I've heard many men say that they've never met a woman that has been sexually assaulted, but you'd be surprised.
No, this was the other way. Yeah, but this was the other way around.
That everybody has been, and that's the assumption that they have been.
Yeah, I can't believe a man would say they've never met a girl that's been sexually assaulted. I mean, it's so prevalent.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Maybe that's
like that.
Men who have a distorted view of how this works, kind of thing. But yeah. And I feel bad for these girls. A couple of them we've come very close to. One especially now, I know Chloe stays in touch with, I know Lou stays in touch with, and we adore her. She's having some health problems. And, she'll tell you that the same thing.
That's just like an assumption.
No, that every girl she's ever known has been sexually assaulted up there as a child, as a minor, I should say. Yeah. So I guess my whole point of that is just that the area is different. And much like with Erica Franlick's case, when you go down there and it's very rural and stuff, I remember actually going to a meeting with the police, and they said we got a discussion about the immediate area where they live. And they were asking me about the interviews I was doing and stuff. And they had told me that this one whole stretch of road, which is a long country road, that every family in that road had some sort of incest.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely otherworldly.
Yeah,
That was New York, though, not Vermont.
yeah, that's New York. It's not illegal here.
All
Yeah,
right.
You know, part of it, I think, has to do with the area up there too, because there's just, there's not a lot, there's no jobs for the kids. There's not a lot for them to do up there at that age. They have to drive to get anywhere. You know, there's not, you can't walk anywhere up there. So there's a lot of freedom, I think, given to the kids as they're growing up. And these older men, I think, tend to prey on the girls. At least they did. I don't know. I assume it's the same way now, but this age group that we're dealing with, Brianna's friends and everything, were, you know, we're targeted, I think, almost by these older guys. Some of them married, so, you know, some of them quite a bit older.
yeah.
And we got a question in the chat room about Othram, and we know that Othram Labs have a sample of DNA in the case, and they were just curious if there was any update on that. I don't know if you guys, Greg or Lou or anyone, know anything about that.
Anything about DNA has to come from the state police. It's not
Right.
something that we're really can talk about at all.
Okay.
Just in general, I can comment a little bit about, forensic evidence that's found at the scene. First, you have to recover it. Secondly, you've got to identify it. And third, now you've got to determine whether that evidence ties into the crime or not. If you think about what, you just take, for example, your house or your car, how much DNA is in there that belongs to other people? How many fingerprints are in there that belong to other people? So, and again, this has nothing to do with Brianna's case whatsoever. I'm just, in general, forensic evidence is great, but you have to tie that into the crime. And if you can't tie it into the crime, it's not valuable evidence.
Okay, so we're still waiting on I guess some official word from Othram or from the Vermont State Police about that sample and the movement there.
That does lead us to like a frustrating scenario when that sample has been collected and analyzed and sequenced, and then they have to compare it to something else to identify, like the whole process there takes months, weeks and months. But then, like, you bring up a great point, Lou, you have to then determine, like, well, it could be there for any reason. Like it could be there for any reason. Someone's DNA could be in someone's car for any reason. They could say, yeah, I just hopped in, I was getting a ride. Like, I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago. Like it doesn't mean anything until you can find the criminal tie to it. So while it's great that they have the DNA, what would it take to put that over the top? Like a confession? Is that what you're looking for? Is to like make somebody nervous enough and maybe, I don't want to say like manipulate the reality of the situation, but to say, listen, your DNA is in the car, you need to fess up. Like, is that something that would happen?
It depends on where the DNA was found and how you can relate that to the crime. I mean, quite often, obviously, in a homicide case, you have a body. Now, if you find someone else's DNA on the body, okay, there's a pretty good chance that they were involved. Or if there's a weapon found. Now, in this case here, we're not privy to what DNA they have, nor necessarily where they found it. So how that ties in is something that the state police know, and that's obviously not something that they want to publicize. So obviously that would be not a good practice to discuss until they know the evidentiary value of it.
Okay. And I just want to mention the PIs for the missing tip line. Lou, you've got it on your background there in the graphic. It looks great. The number is 1-866-531-6660. And if someone's got information in Brianna Maitland's case, can they submit to that tip line?
They can submit information on any case to that tip line, whether it's Brianna's case, a PI for the missing case, or another case that we're not involved in, and we will funnel that to the appropriate agency or location. I mean, we, as Greg and I talk about often, we're private investigators. All we can do is get information. We can't do anything with that information. That's up to the authorities to do. So, you know, our job is to dig up what we can, but ultimately it's the job of the whatever police agency it is to, you know, to do something with that information. So, but anyone who has a tip on anything is more than welcome to submit it. And then, like I said, we'll just funnel it to where it should go.
Lou, did you purposefully get the number of the beast in our toll-free tip line?
No, not purposely, but once I saw it, I thought that maybe it was appropriate.
Well, it's definitely memorable.
You know, you talk about DNA too. That's another issue with Brianna's case, is that the two places you're going to find your evidence are going to be at the crime scene and at the body, if there's a body. We don't have either of those things. Whatever we thought might have been the crime scene, the Dutch burn home in the car, which obviously towed away. So leaves us kind of empty-handed on both ends there, you know.
I think that's one of the things that makes this case difficult, is that you really don't have, I mean, we're not even certain that anything actually happened there to her. It's likely, it's very possible, but very well, whatever happened to her could have happened at a different location. So, you know, it makes the case that much harder, I think, without knowing what happened to her or where it happened to her.
That's another dynamic too. You know, when you talk about people sightings and I don't mean sightings like Atlantic City sighting that we had, but sightings like in that general area in that immediate time frame. You wonder about that, because if she was simply taken from the Dutch burn home within the hour, you know, from that area and gone somewhere else, but she's still around, she's still with someone, or she's still at someone's home or something, that adds a whole other dynamic there where we don't know, you know. So a lot of times people look at this as though everything kind of ended there, which it doesn't, you know.
And you said earlier, right at the top of the show, new people come forward with rumors and you know, these like they inject themselves into the disappearance. How often do these things get back to Bruce?
The rumors get back to him?
Yeah, the rumors, or if somebody comes forward, like if they, I don't know, how do they reach out and say, yeah, I know what happened? Like, how often is Bruce in the loop on those things?
You know, I have certain things that I never made a rule about it, but I just don't like. There's certain things I just, especially stuff like what people would bring us pornography and say there's, you know, she's involved in it, and it's obviously not true. I'm not gonna tell him that shit. You know, it's just garbage. And
we try and vet the information, I think.
Yeah.
And we've gone to him a few times with some things that really look good, you know. And then there's other things, like we had a video sent to us. I don't know if I think I shared that with you, Greg, about this guy who claimed he had a machine that could locate her, and he actually had a Google Earth video, and it zeroed in on a house in Russia.
Yeah.
And there she is, she's in that house, you know. Well, I'm not going to bother Bruce with that, you know.
Yeah. That's, you know, he's been traumatized enough without having other trauma go at him, which that's an interesting topic, because if he was on his own, he would just be mentally beat up all the time. I mean, it would just be, they're pummeling him all the time. We can kind of stand in the way and pick and choose what he gets to see. And he's actually, he was here at my house one time. We were sitting out on my back deck having a beer actually. And I don't remember what the conversation was, but he just looked at me and said, are you withholding anything from me? And I said, no, I wouldn't do that. And then it dawned on me that there was something that I hadn't shown him. It was something I was hanging on to and contemplating and looking into. I wouldn't purposely withhold it from him for any bad reason, or other than I just wanted to know more about it first. But yeah. And sometimes he'll ask, even though he doesn't want to hear, I want to know about this or whatever, either curiosity gets the best of him, or, he wants to know, he wants to be in the loop. Obviously he's the biggest soldier here going after this. So that's a difficult situation. Yeah.
Coming from my end, I think a part of approaching cases like this, focusing on being victim centered, you also need to focus on the secondary victims. The family members of these people that go missing suffer so much every single day, and it's like a balancing act. You don't want to cause them unnecessary harm, because these are people that get phone calls. Obviously a lot is funneled through his private investigators, but he's gotten phone calls like, I know where your daughter is, but I can't tell you. Like, these are things that have happened to him, and I can't even imagine what he goes through when that happens. But just coming from my end, as someone who has a blog about his daughter's case, there have been times where he's asked me if I could send him, all of my notes from a specific interview. And I've had the conversation, I believe, with Lou, just, I should send everything in that interview, even things that might be painful to read, conjecture that might be disturbing or upsetting. And Lou's answer was, yeah, I don't think he would appreciate it if you censored it. So I didn't. And I know that was the right way to go about it, because you have to be respectful. And sometimes that can be with information that's hurtful, but you don't want to do it in a way that's unnecessary.
He's been through a lot, and that pisses me off too. It's a hard topic.
Just to get back on a rumor mill for a minute. Another one that comes to mind that people you see a lot. She was an expert in martial arts. Why didn't she defend herself when she was beat up? Well, number one, she took some jujitsu lessons. That doesn't make her an expert in martial arts. I mean, she was 14 at the time.
Right.
Secondly, when she was involved in that altercation with the other young lady, she was sitting in a pickup truck. And jujitsu is a grappling form of martial art. It's pretty useless if you're sitting inside a pickup truck. You're not, going to be able to utilize the skills that you know. So that's kind of irrelevant to the whole thing. But it's, again, people are trying to make more of it than it is, I think.
That's a good thing to put to rest, because that bugs me every time somebody brings it up.
Yeah.
And they would talk about it, and I'd say, you know what? If 17-year-old girl who had taken some jiu-jitsu class came up and tried to fight me, I'd break her neck like a chicken bone. It's just not going to happen. It's ridiculous on its face. She'd have to be Olympic trained or something to beat up a guy who's 250 pounds or something, and a farmer or something. But the people regurgitate that constantly. I think,
right, Greg, we know you're tough.
Yeah, the fact that she's athletic is the point of that. I think she was athletic and she was strong, and her friends did make comments about her kicking people and stuff like that. I'm sure she was athletic, but is that going to help her in a situation where she's not only that confrontation? People who aren't familiar with confrontation and don't have to go through confrontation all the time don't handle it well. And she was a kid,
I also feel like that specific confrontation with that particular young lady in the pickup truck, I feel like she felt that she deserved to be hit, and she purposefully said, I'm not going to fight back. So I think that's a very poor example of, you know, she like, why didn't she fight back? Why didn't she fight back? That there's a specific reason why. That's been well established too, based on what that party has said, that she said, let's fight. And Bree specifically did not want to fight. So again, not a very good example. And Lou mentioned it's a grappling form of martial arts and that she was in a car. We don't know exactly where Bree was or what stance she was in, but we do know she was last seen driving away in her car. So again, if she's in her car or sitting in her car seated when she's attacked or abducted or whatever happened in this situation, it probably isn't very relevant.
That's a good one to put to rest. Yeah. You know, that's the first time I went up to the first or second time I went up to the Dutch Burn place. I remember standing there in front of the building and thinking, this is it. You know, if we knew what happened right here at this point, at this place, in those few minutes, that's it. Was the confrontation there? You know, because in the beginning I would weave back and forth. Was this a red herring? Was it ditched here? Was it, you know, because things just hadn't been looked into deeply enough at the time.
You know, the other thing that was mentioned, I think, in early reports was that the accident appeared staged. Well, you know,
It doesn't.
I don't know where anybody got that, but
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to stage an accident, you know, it's not a very.
No.
I didn't think a very good job at staging it, anyways.
You know,
it looks like she threw it in reverse, hit the gas, and hit the building, got hung up on it. That's what it looks like to me.
You know, if you going back to the confrontation thing and the violence or whatever, or her defending herself, or whatever. If you're the biggest, strongest person and someone comes up behind you, none of that matters. I mean, it's all irrelevant. If somebody did something to her, and she just didn't have the wherewithal or the means to help herself, whatever the situation is, it's all irrelevant. And the car there being staged, again, that's the whole situation. Like when we were standing there that one day, Lou, me, you, and Jen, and Lou had talked about going around that corner, because you don't realize until you get out and stand there that it is pretty good corner. But I stood right there at the foundation, and then I actually drove it with Jen, and we drove around it, backed right up exactly to where her car was. It just doesn't. It just doesn't lend itself to being it doesn't seem like a setup. You know, her wheels are cranked and there's debris by the car. When they find the car, it's actually got both doors open, the lights are on, and there's a blinker going. It just doesn't seem that way, you know. And then of course you hear stories that it was ditched there, and then again that goes into that whole heinous thing of people coming in and telling you bullshit that misleads you, and it's aggravating. But they tell you it was ditched there, so you go, was it ditched here? You know, is it possible? Well, I guess it's possible. It's aggravating.
Like, why would it be staged? You know, like, does anybody like take a couple of steps back and say, why would a 17-year-old stage that?
Well, someone else.
Into the overdose theory.
Yeah, the overdose theory. Okay, so other late teens, early 20s kids would think to stage that. Like, why would there's so much work that goes into that. Just if someone's overdosing, just drop the body off at a public location. Just drive a little bit further, drop the body off at a gas station.
Lou's answer to this is always, and it's the perfect reply, is that there's literally a million other better places to ditch the car. I mean, you could just put it on the side of a road, and why put it there where everyone's going to see it, right?
Like, I grew up in a small town, and if that ever happened, like in my small circle of friends, and the town I grew up in probably wasn't as small as Montgomery, but it was right around there. If we had an issue like that and somebody died at a party from overdose, like whatever, like if any one of us brought up like, all right, here's what we got to do, guys. We got to take the car. We got to go to that old building, the abandoned building. We got to back it in. Like, we got to make this look like they'd be dragged out. It wouldn't even be a question. Like, to find that many insane early 20s kids in the same location at the same time is impossible.
It's a bizarre thing.
Not since I Know What You Did Last Summer has that happened.
Of course, if someone's heavily, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lou.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
If someone's heavily under the influence of mind altering substances, maybe they're not thinking clearly and they would have thought that that was a good idea. But if a crime happens, whether it's intentional or accidental, and efforts are made to conceal the body so well that 18 years later there's no body, and efforts are made to move the car to either avoid or delay detection or it being connected to you, you would think that if someone had that level of detail and planning and trying to avoid getting captured, why would they leave it in such a conspicuous location in such a conspicuous way?
So there's two things to that. The first one is you think people will think logically and all that other stuff. So you guys are kind of privy to one of these stories where one of the guys was always on the fringes that was thought to be involved, and it was always a rumor. There were girls that would tell us, oh yeah, we'd go over to his trailer and he had been up awake for like 4 or 5 days at a time. He was absolutely delirious, almost psychotic. So then you're thinking, okay, could it be somebody that's in that kind of shape? Well, that particular person lived, anywhere you go there, you have to drive. So those type of people are there. They do make bad decisions and all this other stuff, but they ain't like hauling somebody a big distance away, because if they're in that kind of shape, they're just not doing that.
Hey, did you say earlier that the steering wheel was turned in one specific direction?
Yeah,
Which
Wheels were.
direction?
all the way
Which left or right?
to the left. So in other words, it almost looked like she backed into the building. And she was,
And that she was trying to maybe keep going where she was already going.
it's like she was going to back up. She was going to do a turn
If you
around.
follow the curve, your wheels are turned. If you then throw it in reverse, you're going to go in the opposite direction. And that's exactly, in my opinion anyways, what happened.
I never
you-
knew that before, so thank you.
When you look at, there's pictures from head on, and it's really prominent. Yeah.
I'll definitely check it out.
All those pictures that we have from the World Travelers there, the ones that are all public pictures. It would have been nice if the vehicle hadn't been touched, but of course, James touched the car and he shut the doors and there's the picture. It's putting up your background in it, play. And it's,
There we go.
there you go.
There you go.
There you can see the wheels are turned
Yeah.
really hard. Yeah.
To the left.
Another aspect of this is, and I think we maybe touched on it before, is irresponsible social media, where people, put on web pages and on blogs and even on some podcasts, information that is just totally erroneous. I saw one the other day that I just shook my head because they were trying to give a description of what happened, and they said how she had backed into the house and they searched the house and they found a gun in the house and some drugs.
Yeah.
So, they combined the scene with the house that they raided some weeks later, that after a tip that proved irrelevant, I guess, to the investigation. But, so they really don't, they take little pieces and they don't understand what happened and they just put them together. And I know it's confusing. It took me 6 months to wrap my head around all the facts on this case. It really did, just to know who was who and how they fit in and see time sequence and all that. But it's just totally irresponsible, because people read that and they take that for, well, I read that on a blog or whatever. They take it as fact. And now it floats back as a rumor that, I know this happened because I read it,
One of the things that Lance talked about and Chloe talked about that I kind of disagree with a little bit. I think about it differently, I think, is that you think it's almost like, okay, somebody had to be really smart to hide this body. No one's found this body. No one's found her, or wherever she is, or whatever. I don't agree with that, because you look at Franlick case. I think we pretty much know what happened in Franlick's case. These guys are not rocket scientists by any stretch of the imagination. They just simply had a little bit of time on their side and privacy. And with Brianna's case, again, like with the car, if you just, Vermont is 76% wooded. There's nothing out there. You can drive for miles and there's nothing. You can just walk her off into the woods. I mean, I just don't think that would be hard to do that. I don't think it would be hard, especially with the fact that she's not really being viewed daily by just family and friends and neighbors and stuff like that. She's kind of living her own life and bopping around and doing whatever she's doing. The job she has the next day, she's starting the first day. So no one calls her home and says, hey, it's not like her not to show up. Jillian's gone where she's staying till Monday or whatever. So whatever happens to her, that person could have taken her anywhere. I mean, anywhere. We were driving along, Jen and I, and we ended up, I think Lou too. We ended up at Lake Carmi.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you're driving around this lake and there's homes here, there, and the other thing. And we had gotten tips about Lake Carmi before, which was a really weird thing for people to throw in there and stuff. To give you an idea of, like, Lou always says you don't know what you don't know, which is really sounds simple, but it's really true. Some people, if you just don't have the fact, if you don't have the information, you just don't know. I had a friend who was driving up to his house one time, to tell people this story, and he waved to his neighbor and he started telling me what a great guy he was. And I go, oh, I never heard you mention him before. Do you guys hang out? No. Come over to your house for coffee? No. Well, how do you know he's a great guy? I don't know. Every time I see him, he smiles and waves. That don't make him a nice guy. I go, for all you know, he could be over there beating his wife every night. You don't know what goes on in their house. You don't know if he's a criminal or if he's this, that, and the other thing. And he's like, well, I never really thought of that. And on most of the people, that's their outlook on stuff, rather than say, well, I should be skeptical of my neighbors, whether I know them or not. So, we don't know. We're driving around this lake and I'm looking at all these houses. That's kind of like when she went missing and Bruce was hear him talk about working and trying to work in forestry and stuff, and that he would see birds and head in that direction, thinking that they're circling, stopping on the side of the road when he would see debris and stuff like that. Just absolutely traumatizing things. But what that was now he trusts no one and nothing, which probably you should do, but we live in a society where we trust people.
Just a little bit about that Lake Carmi story. We were looking for a woman who may or may not have had this information, and we found the road and we went to this house. We couldn't find the house number. Basically, the answer was, yeah, this is the right road, but you can't get there from here. We had to go back out on the main road. Remember that? And go up the dirt road and go all the way down the end. We found a house which had burned down, and the people were living in a trailer who had been living in a trailer. Turns out our person we wanted to wasn't there anymore. But it was kind of, one of these strange Vermont things where it was the right road, but you couldn't get from one end to the other. You had to go around.
Yeah. Look, if some acquaintance or a stranger did this, all they have to do is go to their home. Who's going to know? I mean, and then you're in the void. So that's the way I think of that anyway. It's not, and that perception came from Franilik's case, I think, because look, everybody knows Richard's responsible for that. And I say that for a couple of reasons. I'm not afraid to say that publicly for a few reasons, but his own family will tell you that. And he doesn't deny it. But the fact of the matter is he's not a genius. He's, in fact, quite the opposite. But it doesn't take a genius to do that, to get away with it. Anyway, what are you smiling at, Chloe?
No, I just totally agree with you. I would never assert that whoever is responsible for this is necessarily a genius. I mean, even if the perpetrator was a serial killer, most serial killers aren't even geniuses. Most of them are of average intelligence or less. I think
Stealthy out of necessity, right?
Yeah, it's just a combination of, like you said, time, luck, privacy. Although in this situation, there's a confluence of circumstances in which Brianna wasn't immediately noticed or missed when she was missing, but that time window from when she left work and then when her car was observed was so slim that it's kind of hard to grapple with an extremely well thought out and planned conspiracy or cover up method.
That's what, that's the whole thing that kind of, I get perplexed to why people gravitate to Maura's case so much more than Brianna's when they're so close together geographically, and why her case takes on this huge media attraction and stuff like that. Because Maura's kind of got that same thing going on too, doesn't she? Where she spotted at the vehicle, the cops didn't the cops show up in like 7 minutes or something? She's gone. How does that work? How does that? So there's the big question. It kind of like, there's that element going on with Brianna too. That odd scenario. Yeah.
I think you see cases where people are, have a higher socioeconomic status. And in Maura's case, she was in college. She had just gone to West Point. I think those factors gave her a little bit more publicity and intrigue. Plus, with Brianna's case, there was no image of the all-American girl for the public to rip apart at. And that's not to say that the public in Brianna's case doesn't misbehave, because they certainly do. Like in Maura's case, you'll see people demanding that all information that's pertinent to the investigation should be made public. Why don't we know this? There must be some conspiracy. There must be something that investigators are hiding. You see that overlap. I think a lot of people do care. And unfortunately, while it's wonderful that more and more members of the community are becoming interested and are engaging, in Brianna's case, you're starting to see similar patterns of behavior where people just aren't understanding that not all information can or should be made public. And you're getting that same kind of cognitive shortcut where they're jumping to a conspiracy or something.
I thought that people, when they viewed Brianna's case, it always stopped at she was involved in drug activity, and they go, "Oh, it's a drug thing," and that was started by a cop.
Yeah,
who went out publicly and said that, and then they retracted it. But it's always that same thing where, the statement's a headline and the retraction's in the back. It comes out later. People disregard it or whatever. But it always seemed like people looked in the case, they lost interest at that point. It was a drug thing. It's just a drug thing,
I agree.
Becomes
Greg.
a less sympathetic victim.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
Initially, in Brianna's case too, they thought there was a possibility that she had run away. In fact, if you look, I think it's at the Charlie Project, they still say that that she may have been a runaway, which is totally ridiculous. But
yeah.
And we know how that started, because they asked Kelly if she had ever, Brianna's mother, she had ever run away, and she answered yes, without them clarifying that. She was like in elementary school, and they moved, and she got homesick and walked from her school and sat on the front porch of the house that she used to live in. And of course, they found her right away, but that was her quote runaway experience. And
that was a sad story too. That's a hard.
And then it, like you said, the drug angle. First, she wasn't reported missing for media wise for several days, probably almost a week. And then there was the runaway angle. Then there was the drug angle. So it didn't really generate a lot of public interest, like you said. Not like Maura's, where you just an entirely different set of circumstances there.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great evening of discussion. I want to thank everyone for joining us here tonight. I know we could keep this going all night, but we are over our time already, and so I just want to say thank you to everyone here watching at home and here on the Zoom call: Chloe and Melina Cantor, Jennifer Amell, private investigators Lou Barry and Greg Overacker, of course, for Lance and myself. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight, and everyone out there in the chat room. And one other thing, we have been talking internally about doing an in-person private investigations for the missing fundraiser at some point this fall. Nothing to announce yet, just a little tease here that is something we are talking about internally that we're gonna get going. So more on that soon.
In
Thank
Beantown?
you.
No, we said there's not going to be any more. It's a tease, Greg. It's a
What the
tease.
heck, Greg?
You know, Greg, excuse me, Tim Lance, there's one thing that maybe we should mention too. What private investigations for the missing really could use is a grant writer. And if anyone out there who's interested or has experience in writing grants, you know, we need funding to keep going. And
Yeah.
we don't charge families a dime. But obviously, you know, some of the investigators have to get paid. There's expenses involved. So we're really Bruce is really, trying to locate someone that could help us out, would volunteer to help us out with finding grant money.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that before.
Yeah, that's really important. Additionally, if you don't have grant writing experience and you have experience fundraising in any capacity, we could definitely use your help as well.
And one last thing before we go, we should wish Greg a happy birthday.
Oh,
Happy
What?
birthday, Greg.
It's Greg's
Happy
birthday.
birthday.
Happy birthday,
Hang on.
Greg.
What?
Truly happy birthday.
Happy
Can't wait to
30th.
see you in Vegas.
30th. Yeah.
We'll
Happy
celebrate
birthday.
your
Oh, right.
21st
No idea.
in Vegas.
Who's, so who's going to CrimeCon in Vegas?
Chloe and Melina Cantor.
That's all we need to know. Okay, awesome. Great.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining and hanging out with us tonight. We will be back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.